Welcome to the Renegade Health Boss Podcast, where we push the boundaries of what's possible in health and wellness. I'm your host, Heather Gray, a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified bioenergetic practitioner. And each week we dive deep into the world of physical, mental, spiritual health, biohacking, relationships. But we're not just talking about the basics. I'm bringing you conversations with the true renegades, experts who are challenging the status quo in their fields, breaking barriers, and uncovering the real truth behind what it takes to live an incredible, joy-filled, and optimized life. If you're ready to step out of the ordinary and step into a life of extraordinary health and happiness, you're in the right place. Let's get started on this journey to becoming your own Renegade Health Boss. Before we jump in, let's hear a word from our sponsor.
Dr. Nathan Bryan here with our N101 nitric oxide orally disintegrating tablet. You know, nitric oxide is a gas, so how do we deliver a bioactive gas in a solid dose form? We've created a solid dose form of bioactive gas. This lozenge, which is designed to have a resident time of 5 to 6 minutes. So you take this lozenge, you put it in your mouth, don't chew it, don't swallow it. Let it dissolve. As it's dissolving, it's releasing a certain amount of nitric oxide over a certain period of time. And that release of nitric oxide is designed to recapitulate nitric oxide production and nitric oxide signaling. So if your body can't make nitric oxide for whatever reason, this product delivers it for you. But more importantly, the technology in this lozenge recouples the NOS enzyme, so we improve endothelial function. We improve the body's ability to make nitric oxide on its own. And because it's an orally disintegrating tablet that sits on the top of the tongue and moves around, it's killing the bad bacteria. It's maintaining the diversity of the oral microbiome. We're improving the nitrate-reducing bacteria, so we're improving the oral microbiome. So this product generates nitric oxide and improves the body's ability to make nitric oxide through both pathways, endothelial nitric oxide production through restoration of the oral microbiome. There's no other product on the market that does what this product does. This is an orally disintegrating tablet that releases nitric oxide. We can quantify it, we can detect it, we can verify it. So if your body can't make nitric oxide, we do it for you. N101 activating lozenges. Get it today.
Yay! Welcome, Katie, to the show. Thanks for joining us today, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. You and I have gotten to chat before, and I'm super excited to do it again.
Me too, except the tables are turned this time. It's all about you. I would love to know, because I actually don't know a whole lot of your pain to purpose, your origin story, like where did Wellness Mama come from? So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I'll try to give the quick version and then happy to go deeper on any part that feels relevant. But the short version is that about now, almost 18 years ago, I had my first son. I was sitting in the waiting room of the doctor's office for my 6-week follow-up appointment. And as OBs often are, this one was late. So I was waiting for hours and was just nursing my son, reading through everything in the whole waiting room because I was so bored. And I think it was Time magazine, but I came across an article that said, for the first time in 2 centuries, the current generation of American children will have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. And here I am holding this tiny member of the next generation of American children and reading about how they're going to face what we're now seeing, increased rates of every chronic disease across the board. We're seeing it play out. Of course, 92% of Americans are not metabolically healthy or have at least one marker of metabolic dysfunction. But almost 20 years ago, this article was kind of predicting what we're now seeing. And holding this tiny newborn and that stark contrast of this perfect baby and what this article was saying he would face, it kind of lit a fire in me that day of, I want to help change that statistic. I had no idea how. Up until that point, my background had been research and journalism, certainly not anything to do with chronic disease or health. But synchronously, as it often is, I also started having some weird health symptoms myself around that time. And I would not for years actually get any answers related to what was going on, but there was sort of this dual purpose that ignited in trying to figure out what was going on with me and looking into how can I create a better world for my kids and hopefully also for this whole next generation. And it became a very long and winding path of research and experimentation and trying to find practitioners and doctors who I could work with. And as many people listening might have also experienced, being told many times, your labs are normal, it's all in your head, this is just part of being a woman or a mom or postpartum, or get used to it, or we can put you on birth control, or all these things that I'm sure women often have heard from doctors. And so I, very long and winding, eventually found pieces that worked for me, and also found that what kind of the recurring message I've gotten over and over in these last almost 20 years is, yes, health is so individual and so personalized. There are some universal things that benefit us almost all across the board as humans, but I feel like the real valid experimentation is actually in the experimentation of self, both in the physical health realm, in the inner realm as well. And I often see in the health world, those parts get discounted. We hear of like the validity of the double-blind placebo-controlled studies. And what I learned the hard way was the most effective study we will ever do is the study of self. And if the N of one is you, that is the most valuable data you can ever get. And double-blind placebo-controlled studies can be great as a starting point. And if you are not part of that population that gets those results in those studies, they are also irrelevant to you. And so it was a long and winding journey of figuring out those pieces, and now sort of having the mission to help other people on the same journey discover their own pieces, not to adopt mine, not to follow my blueprint, but to be able to go on that journey of self-experimentation and arriving at the belief that we are each our own primary healthcare provider. And I believe we can and should work with practitioners who can help us on the journey. But I think it's really important to start from the driver's seat of taking ownership, like full driver's seat ownership of our health, so that we have the power to create change. And I was a slow learner in that realm as well, but that's kind of the long and winding path of my journey and how I ended up here.
I'm not so sure slow learner. We have been brainwashed efficiently, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I grew up with, this is a part of a balanced breakfast bullshit. That's diabetes in the making, right? Like, and I remember that same article because my kid was about 4 or 5 when that article came out. And I was just starting my health journey through Lyme and thinking the same thing. And I remember beating that drum for forever. I'm like, folks, wake up. Like, dong, 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 and nobody was listening to me. They all still kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, here it is. This is a research study. Like, this is, and still nothing has changed since that article has came out. Nothing has changed. The FDA still allows all these harmful chemicals, additives, preservatives, colorings into our kids' food. They're trying to, I don't think Ozempic is the devil, but I don't think it should be used as the first line of defense for 8-year-olds who are obese. Like, it's madness. It's pure madness. And it sucks when you feel like you're the only sane one, right? Standing there around everybody else who's just still kind of brainwashed. You're going like, wake up.
Yeah. Well, thankfully you're right. We're definitely seeing those statistics play out. And I've also seen, when I first started entering this world, you probably had this experience as well. There was not grass-fed beef in grocery stores. I could not buy organic coconut oil in the grocery store. I had to either source these things online or often find an Amish farmer who would meet me in a parking lot to illegally sell me raw milk and ground beef. So we are seeing some changes there, but what really inspires me is I think it's actually women who are leading the charge, especially moms who are voting and making the decisions within our own families rather than waiting for the sort of like large landscape to change. We're deciding we can change this on a small scale here. And I think that grassroots movement can create big change over time. And hopefully we also do see eventually a top down with bigger corporations making these changes, because them kind of buying in with economies of scale will move that needle a lot more quickly. But until that time, we at least each have the ability to make that decision for ourselves, for our families. And so I do see many more moms like making that decision and speaking with other moms about it. And that inspires me a lot to see.
Oh, absolutely. Voting with your pocketbook is hugely powerful. And it is great to see these changes. And there's still a long ways to go. I love the fact that there was a big group of, health practitioners and health advocates, at Kellogg's door, just a few weeks ago, advocating that they take out these horrible chemicals that are allowed here in the United States. A lot of people still don't realize that there are 2 different flavors of Kellogg's. There's Kellogg's that they sell in other countries that doesn't have all the additive crap that the United States allows, right? And then there's ours. And we're now seeing direct, correlation to ADHD, depression, anxiety, autoimmune, obesity to these chemicals. And moms are a scary bunch when we get mobilized and decide that we're enough, like things are really going to change. So, super exciting. We're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, I want to dive deeper into, because you touched on it just a little bit, and as being a functional practitioner, I was guilty of this in the beginning myself, like just focusing on the physical, just take my supplements and make sure I'm into bed by 10 and getting movement, which are all foundational things. But there's even something before that that really still gets missed, and it's mindset stuff. And so I want to dive deeper into that when we come back. And so she's got some exciting news. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey there. I used to not be able to drink coffee. I always reacted to it horribly. It hurt my stomach. It made me over jittery and would inflame me and cause histamine issues. But not anymore. Since I started drinking Danger Coffee by Dave Asprey. It's his next level of coffees. He came out with Bulletproof, and now this is the next level up. So it is mold-free, toxin-free, and he infuses it with minerals and electrolytes. So unlike other coffees, they can actually pull minerals and electrolytes from your system because it's too acidic. It actually helps replenish those. And so I don't react to it at all. I get to have my Bulletproof coffee with my MCT oil and my grass-fed butter, and I don't get the jitters, I don't get the crashes, and I love how focused and energized it makes me feel. Again, non-toxic, mold-free, infused with minerals and electrolytes. I absolutely love Danger Coffee. Make sure to check out my website, thelyboss.com. Go to the resource section and get yours. Yay, welcome back. I'm super excited to dive in deeper. So let's talk more about the mindset and kind of what did it take for you to, truly get healthy, and what are you seeing as far as trends out there and around, what it really takes to get healthy and stay healthy?
I love this question. And I do think there will be a little bit of variation here for each of us, but I think in a large part, sort of the stepping stones of this journey, there are some similarities. And in hindsight, I can say this was a part that took me the longest to figure out, and that seemed the most frustrating for a very long time, because it sounds like maybe we had a similar experience in this. But once I started researching, once I opened my eyes to the idea that there was more to food than just calories, and there was more to the messages going into my body beyond gaining weight or losing weight, it was such an eye-opening experience. My friend JJ says, your body is not a bank account, it's a chemistry lab. And learning how the things I was eating were essentially sending chemical signals to my body, and like diving into that whole world was so fascinating. And learning about genetics and supplements and all the biohacking things and all of that. And it didn't alone resolve the issues I was dealing with. So in the past, I used to have Hashimoto's, and I was, of course, told by the conventional medical world that that was going to be a lifelong condition. It could never go into remission. I would need to take medication for the rest of my life. Thankfully, I did not want to fully accept that answer at face value, but I also didn't know if there could be or would be other answers. But I started trying to approach that question with curiosity. And in the meantime, I was sort of synthesizing all the information from all this research I was doing and building these massive spreadsheets of all these healthy habits and supplements and routine and following them to the letter of the law and getting essentially no results. I do think it was helpful that I was building that physical health foundation. I think that eventually allowed all the things I would then do to work more effectively and more quickly, because I was at least giving my body the micronutrients it needed and enough protein by that point to signal safety, and getting enough sleep, and these things that truly are important for supporting our bodies. But the part that I was missing was the mindset around that and the inner landscape that I feel like is very important as sort of the motivator for the physical action. I was sort of focused on the top level physical action and not the underlying reasons why. And more specifically, I was sort of trying to force and control and will my body to do what I wanted it to do, rather than befriend it and listen to it and understand what it was trying to tell me. I was trying to spot treat symptoms and make them go away as if they were a problem, rather than listen to them as if they were messages that my body was trying to speak to me. And sort of at a bigger scale, I was trying to outsource my healing to find those answers outside of me, rather than to insource and listen internally to what my body and also sort of my inner experience and mindset were actually really needing and requiring for that healing to happen. And this, like I said, was a slow change for me. And it involved looking at past traumas and things that I had been largely ignoring. Sort of quick overview of that was that I had a really traumatic experience of assault in high school. And the takeaway for me with that was I did not like the feeling of helplessness. And so I had created all these elaborate constructs and walls to keep myself safe so that I never had to feel helplessness again. And in doing so, I had shut down pretty much every other emotion as well. And it turns out our nervous system is not very happy if we shut down every single emotion and refuse to feel them. So that was a part that I got to untangle and learn to make friends again with my emotions, with my body, and to create a relationship there, to rebuild a bridge that I had long since burned and shut down. And it was the mindset of shifting away from being told conventionally, you have an autoimmune disease, your body is attacking itself, and buying into that mindset and realizing, no, my body is always on my side. It's always, always acting in my best interest. If it's not optimally healthy, it is because it either needs something it doesn't have, or it's getting too much of something it doesn't need. And it's trying to tell me that. So how can I learn to listen? And how can I have a better two-way communication with my body to resolve whatever's going on? And more importantly, stepping into the ownership of being my own primary healthcare provider, understanding that I'm the one making the decisions every day that change the sort of the trajectory of my body and if it's going to heal or not. And like build that relationship in a positive way, and stop saying those things like I'm sick, I am broken, my body is attacking itself, and shifting my inner landscape into I am healing.
Wait. Say that louder for the people in the back, because it drives me bonkers. Even poor Lyme disease folks, they wear that diagnosis like a cloak of of honor, and they even call themselves cute little names like I'm a limey, I'm a fellow limey, and I'm like, no. I don't associate with that term. It's part of that victim mentality. And you also brought this up at the beginning part too. It's about taking responsibility, right? Because, everyone's doing the best they can with the tools they have. But as you learn that better, we have to do better. And that's part of taking that responsibility and getting back in the driver's seat, like you had talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think this is a tough topic. And it was one that, me 15 years ago, I would have had a hard time hearing in the way that I would be able to hear it now, perhaps. I do feel like it's a very valuable journey to go on. And there's all kinds of quotes along the lines of our ability to change is directly proportional to the amount of sort of uncomfortable truth that we can hear about ourselves without running away. And I've seen that sort of play out for me. I was by no means good at this in the beginning. But to your point, I think the identity piece is really big, especially anything that comes after the words I am, I think is very powerful. And so when we send that message every day, I am sick, or I am diabetic, or I am, I have and I am kind of along the same thing, but that's a very powerful signal to our body. And I feel like it does not come from a place of empowerment when we put negative words after the words I am. And so even if you only start paying attention to that and choosing new statements, and so even if you still are experiencing the symptoms of what you would consider illness, instead of saying I am sick, say I am healing, which puts your body in a much different state than I am sick, or I am diabetic. No, you are not diabetic. You are whoever you are. You're not even actually your name or a mom or any of the things you would put beyond that, but you certainly are not diabetic as your identity. You can move beyond that identity, even if you still are experiencing some of the effects of whatever that experience is. And I think also from like kind of a self-pity perspective, there's also worth looking at. This would have been a very uncomfortable truth for me even 10 years ago, but starting to get curious around the questions of what benefit am I getting from having this experience of whatever the illness is? Because I didn't like to admit it to myself, but there were payoffs. There were emotional payoffs to that experience that I wasn't willing to look at. Being sick, having fatigue, having Hashimoto's, that gave me automatic boundaries. That let me get out of things I didn't want to do because who could argue with me if I'm sick? That let me not have to actually kind of push into stuff that I wanted to do in life or try things that I might fail at because I was sick. It was a perfect excuse. And I would not have looked at that the same way 10 years ago. And I would not have appreciated someone saying that to me 10 years ago. But it's become part of the journey as well. And so I think it's at least worth getting curious about. I think curiosity is a tremendous antidote, especially when we can be curious in our inner landscape. So not from a judgmental perspective, back to the Walt Whitman quote of be curious, not judgmental, but get curious about your inner experience. Ask those questions and be willing to sit with the discomfort of the answers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, I had a high A score, adverse childhood experiences, a lot of abuse and neglect as a kid. And I was never nurtured, taken care of, so when I got sick, it felt good to be taken care of and in that way, I'll admit. And I still, have a hard time setting those boundaries of looking for outside nurturing when it really should be coming from me, right? So, yeah, they're all fascinating. I love the whole. There, so many expressions. They're kind of cliche, but they don't become cliches without some validity behind them, right? Like I love Dr. Joe Dispenza. Breaking the habit of being yourself. You got to change your personal reality if you want to change your. You got to change your personality if you want to change your personal reality, right? Like so many people still think that they can heal with the same mindset and lifestyle that kind of got them sick to begin with. So I love this. I love this conversation. Tell us a little bit about so what were some of the steps that you kind of did? I mean, so taking ownership, responsibility, kind of getting out of victim, do you have any other little nuggets of kind of like mindset stuff that you worked with? And then I also know that by the time this episode goes out, your wellness center should be open. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I think this is so valid, especially you mentioned that many of the people listening are women. And we know that even autoimmune disease, for instance, affects women at a much higher rate than it does men. And I think there are many reasons for this, certainly hormonal and physical reasons as well. But we also see typically a correlation for women, especially women with autoimmunity, and that sort of like over nurturing of others and not nurturing of self, or that sort of like over giving, lack of boundaries. This is a common thing I know a lot of practitioners speak to when they work with women who have autoimmunity. And that was certainly true for me. And so that illness let me have an excuse to have better boundaries without having to actually source internally those boundaries and be confident in them. And I think that's also a journey for many women, is learning to be comfortable saying things like no as a full sentence, or I'm not available for that, or that doesn't work for me. I think that's part of the mindset that goes along with that as well. And I would say from sort of a top-down perspective, the biggest mindset shift for me was where the motivation came from to make the changes. Because the irony was, when my Hashimoto's went away, when I lost over 80 pounds without trying to, nothing physically had changed. I was already doing all those healthy habits. I do think they're important. I was getting morning sunlight. I was dialed in on my sleep. I was getting gentle movement every day, not high intensity at that point. I was being very gentle with my nervous system. I was nourishing my body and taking supplements and getting enough micronutrients, and probably for the first time in my adult life, eating enough protein and things like that. But those alone did not make the shift until my nervous system shifted from my emotions and mindset shifting. And that was sort of the catalyst that let all the physical health things work. So I do think those foundational things are kind of beneficial across the board to every human. The natural light, spending time in nature, getting hydration, getting enough micronutrients, and sending safety signals to the body through movement and food. So I do think those are important, not to discount those things. But what made those things effective for me was the mindset shift away from trying to sort of like control and micromanage and force my body into what I wanted it to be, and or run away from the symptoms I didn't want it to have. And instead, truly shifting that relationship with my body to one of curiosity and making friends. And that didn't happen until I addressed the emotions I had been ignoring, until I started auditing my inner language and my dialogue. A lot of psychiatrists say that our subconscious does not understand the difference between the words that we're telling ourselves and something that might be a different reality, which means we have tremendous power in the way we talk to ourselves. And I think that inner dialogue is actually one of the best tools we have in our arsenal to change our outer reality. And it was a practice for me to slowly learn to rewire how I was talking to myself. It was noticing in the mirror one day. This was actually a big moment of change for me, was realizing I saw my, at the time, 12-year-old daughter see me look in the mirror. And I saw it register on her face the way I was looking at myself with disgust in the mirror. And I realized that it probably had never occurred to her to look at herself with anything other than just appreciation and love. And I saw that register on her face. And in that moment, I decided I do not want to leave that legacy for my daughters. I do not want to give them this mental prison that I've created for myself. And so in that instant, the pain of changing became less than the pain of staying the same. And I started to really pay attention to that inner landscape, because I knew I would never speak to my daughter or a friend or my mom in the way that I was speaking to myself. And it was hard to learn to rewrite that. But slowly over time, it became more and more automatic. And now I get to live in a much more peaceful inner landscape because I sort of audited and changed the way I was speaking to myself. And that, I think, let all of those physically supportive things I was doing actually really take hold and create benefit.
Absolutely. It was funny. I was in the middle of like completely berating myself a couple years ago. And my husband says to me, "Stop talking to my wife that way." And it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, What? And it dawned on me. Yeah, I wouldn't talk to my worst enemy the way that I was talking to myself, and so that felt like a part-time job in itself, right? Like catching all that and redirecting and redirecting and redirecting, reframing. It can feel a little daunting at first, but it's possible. I now hear other people, I hear it in other people, and it makes me cringe. I'm so sad. It's like, oh, stop talking to yourself like that. That's no, no. But it can be done. It absolutely can be done. So tell us a little bit about your healing space that's going to be, by the time this comes out, it should be open. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And I'll send you a link to it so you can put it in the show notes if you'd like to, once it's for sure up and we can verify that. But really the last 5 years or so, one thing that I have noticed is that this is a commonality in a lot of the research, and certainly in the Blue Zone studies, is the importance of community. And in fact, when AI analyzed the Blue Zone studies, that was the strongest thing that was pulled from the data. We like to debate, did they drink red wine? Did they eat Mediterranean diet? Were they vegan? They weren't, but we debate all these things of what made the Blue Zones the Blue Zones. And the strongest commonality they all have is that they do all these things in community. And in the last 5 years, especially, I think we've seen a fracture of community so much in our society, or community is just moving more and more online, but less proximal, less actual interaction with the nervous systems of other human beings, even though we know how vital that is. We know that, babies will literally die without that interaction with other human beings. And that doesn't go away for us when we're adults. We're just able to cope with it better. And so it had been on my heart a lot to create more opportunities for proximal in-person community in the world. And I think we're seeing a wave of this everywhere. I'm just happy to be able to contribute in my local area. And also from having learned of all these modalities, again, not that they're the end all be all, I think it does start with mindset and community, but that can be so helpful when you're on a healing journey. And I feel like even more helpful if you get to do them in proximity to people you care about and who care about you. And so I'm working on opening an in-person wellness center that will have all of the normal parts you would have in a wellness center, like sauna and cold and red light, but also some more cutting edge ones like a salt cave and a lot of nervous system focus and things like the biocharger, as well as the ability to do full body composition scans through DEXA and kind of track metrics over time that we know are correlated with longevity, all around the focus of doing those things in community, having a co-working space where entrepreneurs or people who are in a business in any capacity can come together and get inspiration, but more importantly, just to get that compounding benefit of all these activities when we get to do them with other people. So it's been a really fun passion project that I'm so excited to see come to fruition, and even more excited to get to spend time in community myself with people in the new space.
That's absolutely incredible and absolutely true. There's been so much research out lately that the, antidote to addiction is community, and that's part of the reason why we have this massively addictive and disassociative community is because there is no community, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm one of those as well. I work from home, I work remotely. It's just me and the camera. And even though I have these lovely conversations with people, it's not the same as being in the same space. And I'm an extrovert on steroids. And so if I go too long without actually getting out in the real world, like I literally go batshit crazy. And being around people really, it fills my cup. And the decisiveness, I mean, especially with this last, political campaign that went on, like the division that it's caused, the hate. It's just so sad because things are only going to get worse if we don't figure out. We have got to come together and figure this out. We are not enemies. We're all people trying to do the same thing. So beautiful, beautiful awareness. Thank you for doing what you do in this world. So do you work with people, or tell us a little bit about kind of, how people learn more about what it is you're up to?
The easiest way is just wellnessmama.com. I'm not doing any one-on-one work right now, but I have a massive library of blog posts that kind of go into every different topic imaginable that people want to choose to learn that through reading. I also really enjoy podcasting and have almost 900 episodes of my podcast that cover a lot of different topics as well. And I'm pretty active on Instagram, at least social media, and love interacting with people directly. But that's about the extent of my sort of like one-on-one interaction at this point. Just my focus really is my kids. My oldest just turned 18, and I feel like the others will be far too, quickly right behind him. And so I'm trying to really be as much proximal to my kids, especially in this season of life.
Oh, absolutely. Mine's 21 and you blink and it's just like, boom, that's it. And I'm like, I'm an empty nester now, which don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore. And there's a part of me that still grieves, being a full-time mom and those regrets of kind of wishing I had more time with him and that sort of stuff. But so yay to you that you're able to take that kind of space and really love on them, because pretty soon they're going to be like, kick rocks, mom, I'm out.
It's so bittersweet. It happens in an instant. And I used to hear people say, it feels like just yesterday, and I get it now. It has gone by so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure everyone to check out the show notes for the links, and God bless. Have a healthy day.
Thank you so much.
If you learned anything, even one little nugget in any episode, please do not keep us a secret. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple, on Spotify. That is how we get this information out there, and we change this paradigm one person at a time. I can't do it by myself. I need your help. Also, make sure to know that disclaimer, anything that you hear on this, you cannot hold Discovering Health LLC, Renegade Health Boss, The Line Boss, or Heather Gray liable for anything. Always consult your doctor before doing anything new. Do not take this as medical advice. This is your disclaimer. And then also, if you want to know the foundations of health, right? All that I talk about on how I get healthy, the absolute foundations: sleep, diet, exercise, what to eat, toxins, how to detox mold, all of it. You can get it in your own course at rhbcourses.com. Right? Start your healing journey today, as little as $79. Start today, rhbcourses.com. Stay tuned, and thanks for joining us.